am ready.
Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Eloisa Ramos and I am here with Sonia. Hi, Sonia.
Hi.
And Teresa.
Hi.
Hi. So we are studying the text of A Course in Miracles, and we are working on chapter 2, and it's section 6, fear and conflict. Okay. All right. So paragraph 1. Being afraid seems to be involuntary, something beyond your own control. Yet, I have said already that only constructive acts should be involuntary. My control can take over everything that does not matter, while my guidance can direct everything that does, if you so choose. Fear cannot be controlled by me, but it can be self-controlled. Fear prevents me from giving you my control. The presence of fear shows that you have raised body thoughts to the level of the mind. This removes them from my control and makes you feel personally responsible for them. This is an obvious confusion of levels. Okay. All right, so let's just kind of clarify here. When it's talking about I, like in line 2, yet I have said already. The I is what? It's the speaker of the, the course. So it's, you can, yeah, it can be Christ, mind, Jesus, or you can think of it as the Holy Spirit as the guide. So, so being afraid seems to be involuntary, something beyond your own control. And yeah, that's true, right? When we are fearful, it's as if it just kind of shows up and we didn't, we didn't have anything directly to do with it. But what it's saying here is that I have already said that only constructive acts should be involuntary. So fear is not a constructive act because it's not uplifting. And it's also constricting. If you think about how you feel when you're scared, and you can sense that in your body, there's always some type of sensation of constriction, of limitation. And so let's see. So it's saying that, if we're going to make things involuntary, unconscious, basically, let's just make those constructive. Let's, not build up these patterns of going into reactivity that's just fear. Why don't we build up the patterns of making it just as what's the word? Making it as easy to respond to something automatically with forgiveness. Why not? Why not? Why not train the mind in that same way that we've learned to train our own, reactions that are fearful? Why not turn them around and have it be loving? So it says, my control can take over everything that does not matter, while my guidance can direct everything that does, if you so choose. So the choice is for us to decide which guide we want as a teacher, as the one that is going to direct what we do. And that would be the true perception, the mind that serves the Holy Spirit, the link to knowledge, the voice for God. It's not the voice of God, it's the voice for God. So it's a thought system that represents the unconditional love that God is. So it's not the voice of God itself, but it's that thought system, which is what we call the true perception, which is what results in true perception. So it's a thought system of God, of love. And if we choose, we can take direction from that in what we do. For everything that does matter. Now, there's a lot of stuff, obviously, that we do every day that, they're just basic things that we do, but that they don't really matter. I mean, does it really matter if I have cereal for breakfast or I have an egg for breakfast? Well, not really. It's just breakfast. Okay, so so all of that can be controlled by our higher mind, without us having to like give any attention or even any thought to that. It's like, because it doesn't matter. But for the things that do matter, in the sense that, how we choose to work with our family members, how we choose to interact with people at the supermarket, how, those things matter because they are going to, they're going to have they're going to influence. So we impact and influence one another as a collective. And what we're doing there is we're either supporting with what we do and what we say and all of that, what we think, we're either supporting a thought system of fear or we're supporting a thought system of love. And so in those things that matter, then we want to let the guide that is has direct knowledge of love to guide that. And this is why. So number 4 says fear cannot, so the reason why that's in our best interest is because it's going to I know it's a weird way to say it, but that's how we save the world. Okay, because the world we made is a reflection of our thought system. And until we change our thought system and choose the guide for love, all we're going to experience and see in the world is conflict and fear and war and all of that. And that's what we ultimately are wanting to save. We're wanting to heal that perception. And we're going to the mind, which is the source of that. So we can change who we are taking guidance from. But what it says here is that fear cannot be controlled by me, but it can be self-controlled. Okay, so fear is not real, even though it feels real to us. We make it. So that's why we all don't have the same fears, because it's very personal. So, so I'm not afraid of spiders, but I have family members that are. Okay. And so we learn those fears. So, and we hold on to them. And that's why they're self-controlled. Fear prevents me from giving you my control. So fear is a block to having our life be guided and kind of taken care of, where we can just be at peace and not have to have all these worries and, make all these they're decisions that aren't really decision. Okay, what am I going to have for breakfast? Well, what kind of decision is that? Food is food. If we want to make it different and we want to make it special, then we're going to get stuck in trying to control every little thing, which gets really, really complicated and tiring and confusing. So but fear is a block because it prevents me, our higher mind, our true self, Holy Spirit, from giving you my control. So the presence of fear shows that you have raised body thoughts to the level of mind. Okay, so a body thought would be, okay, yeah, what am I going to eat today? That's a body thought because it's about the body. And I believe that without food, my body cannot survive. And once I raise them to the level of mind, to say, well, that's a really important decision. I'm what I eat, what I put into my body is going to either make me healthy or unhealthy. I am giving causality to matter, and I'm making the matter creative. So what I'm saying is that whether I eat cereal or whether I eat an egg is going to have different effects because I'm making the food causal. And that's why it says over here that this is number 8, this is an obvious confusion of levels. And so if I raise those body thoughts to the level of mind, I am going to feel personally responsible for those decisions. So I'm going to feel like, oh my God, I'm not healthy. And it's probably because I choose to eat food that's not good for me. And so I'm going to feel personally responsible for those things that I do because I've given them causality when they don't have causality. But it's so common to do that, that we don't even question it. We just automatically go there. It's like, oh, there's got to be a reason why I'm not healthy. It must be my diet. It must be that I, don't exercise. It must be something with the body. So we forget that the mind is causal. Yeah. So any questions with that one? Yeah. So, okay. All right. Sonia, number 2.
2. I do not foster level confusion, but you must choose to correct it. You would not excuse insane behavior on your part by saying you could not help it. Why should you condone insane thinking? There is a confusion here that you would, let me read that again. There is a confusion here that you would do well to look at clearly. You may believe that you are responsible for what you do, but not for what you think. The truth is that you are responsible for what you think because it is only at this level that you can exercise choice. What you do comes from what you think. You cannot separate yourself from the truth by, quote, giving, unquote, autonomy to behavior. This is controlled by me automatically as soon as you place what you think under my guidance. Whenever you are afraid, it is a sure sign that you have allowed your mind to miscreate and have not allowed me to guide it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What comes to mind, Sonia, when you read this? What comes to mind?
Well, 2 things. I was thinking about my asthma, and I was also thinking about my skin. I mean, those are just some examples. Because I was giving, so for the asthma, for example, I was giving the exercise, the causality for my asthma attack. So I was giving the behavior, like number 8, you cannot separate yourself from the truth by giving autonomy to behavior. So I was giving the autonomy to the physical exertion that I was doing. So that exercise itself, that when my body was doing, and I was giving that causality, but it's just completely not true because now I can do it and there's no asthma attack at all. So that's the only thing that came up.
Okay, anything for you, Teresa?
I just think it's amazing that we can place what we think under the Holy Spirit's guidance,
Mhm.
and that can resolve this all.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. But so it's simple in theory, right?
Yes.
But in practice, so that's why the study of Course in Miracles is a daily lesson practice because the pattern that we've established is number 5. You may believe that you're responsible for what you do, but not for what you think. So we pay attention to what we do and to what other people do. But we don't tend to notice what we think as
Mhm.
much. Okay. Um, so we don't observe our thoughts, and because we don't observe the thoughts, it's as if they're not even there. They're kind of all just unconscious. And therefore we try to solve our problems that come from doing, and we look for solutions that are also doing what I do. And so we tend to get stuck just there with the problem and then the solution, which is the same thing, doing and doing. And we forget that the mind is behind the doing. And so the truth is that number 6, that we are responsible, that you are responsible for what you think, but because it's only at this level that you can exercise choice. Okay. Now, most of the time we think that the choice is in what we do. Okay. Am I going to sit down and watch TV, or am I going to go out for a walk? Okay. And then those choices, as a pattern, 10 years from now, if I develop some kind of, I don't know, problem, and they say, oh, well, you haven't been exercising enough. I'm going to look back and say, darn it, I made all those bad choices for choosing to watch TV instead of going for a walk. And I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to feel guilty for that. But it's not what we do. The truth is that we are responsible for what we think, because the seeming decision to watch TV is really coming from what I think. And so I have to go back if I want to undo that kind of a pattern, or if I want to get out of that that guilt. I have to go back to my thinking, and and look at my thoughts and look at how I have miscreated in terms of believing that I can be sick, and believing that the cause of that is something that I did as a body. So I'm believing I'm a body, and I'm believing that I can make myself sick as a body. And therefore, I'm believing that I'm basically killing myself by what I do, which is, how much, there's got to be tons of guilt in there somewhere buried under there. So, so we want to get out of that it's almost like a hell. I hate to use that word because that's it's a belief too, but if we believe in it, we're going to have experiences, and we're going to say, oh my gosh, this must be what hell is like, and so I'm imagining suffering and torment, and if that's what I'm feeling, then I'm going to say, yeah, this is hell. So because I'm guilty, and if I believe that guilt is deserving of punishment, well, heck, I'm sick now. Is that punishment? So I'm punishing myself, so it's this whole fearful thought system of guilt, sin, punishment, and suffering. The outcome is all suffering. So I have to go back to my thoughts, because I have to release the fearful thoughts so that I can turn to the Holy Spirit as a guide, and have the Holy Spirit control all of those, decisions that don't matter, because they're not really decisions. Which is the behavior, that Sonia was talking about. It's not that the behavior is actually autonomous. It just seems that way because we've made all these assumptions in our thinking to make it look that way. And so 10, whenever you are afraid, and that's fearful, once we believe that we have no control over our own behavior, well, how can we change anything? We're stuck with the problems that we have. So whenever you are afraid, number 10, it is a sure sign that you have allowed your mind to miscreate and have not allowed me to guide it. Yeah. And once we realize that that's not that's not a comfortable situation for us, and it's not tolerable, and it's not what we want, we're much more determined to look at our thinking and to be open to changing that. Okay, number 3, Teresa.
It is pointless to believe that controlling the outcome of misthought can result in healing. When you are fearful, you have chosen wrongly. That is why you feel responsible for it. You must change your mind, not your behavior, and this is a matter of willingness. You do not need guidance except at the mind level. Correction belongs only at the level where change is possible. Change does not mean anything at the symptom level where it cannot work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so anything with that?
I don't get what it means by controlling the outcome of misthought. How can you control that?
Right. So what we do is we have behaviors that are maybe that we know are not good for us. So maybe we have, an addiction to smoking, or maybe hey, maybe I like to indulge in eating chocolate. I mean, whatever the behavior is, maybe we are, well, let's see, I can probably give you an example. So, my grandkids, I was driving them to school and the three of them were in the back seat, and the oldest one is sensitive to like noise or loud noises, and the two younger ones already know how to trigger him. So the little one is going like, and then the older one's like, stop it, and then the other one knows that he doesn't like to be crowded, so she's like getting really close to him, like, and she's like, and of course that's just like, oh my gosh, he's like, don't do that, he's just like freaking out. Oh my goodness. And I'm like, hold on. I said to the older one, they're not, because he said, tell them to stop doing that to me. And I said, wait a minute. They're not doing that to you. Your own mind is responsible for how you're feeling and how you're reacting. They don't have that power to do that to you. And he says, yes, they do. And I go, no, they don't. It's your own thinking, it's the way that you are looking at it. And I said, you are giving away your power. You don't have to give away your power. No one can hurt you that's outside of you, because your safety is within you. You bring that with you. When you were created, you brought in safety and it's inside of you. Okay. And he kind of stopped for a minute, and then he was fine. And then he was at peace. The whole thing just not there, So I think his mind was able to comprehend that at some level, because I think he was reversed and then he unreversed. So this is sort of what we're saying, that when we are fearful, we have chosen wrongly. So he's fearful because he thinks that what his brothers and sisters do are an attack to him. Okay, so he's believing that he has no control over their behavior. And once we feel that we have no control over someone's behavior, we feel like we can be victims to it. So we don't feel safe. And as long as we keep believing that the cause is external, then we have no control. And that's a very, that's feeling powerless, and that's feeling helpless, and that's why he was so upset. So when we take guidance from the ego, we're taking guidance from a thought system of fear that says that we are vulnerable to attack from others, or even from our own behavior if it's out of control. And the correction would be like what he was asking me to do, make them stop. And I could have done something to threaten them so they would stop doing what they were doing, but that would be trying to correct the error in the level where the change, where the source of the problem is not. So we have to go back to the thinking, to the mind that's making that fearful. Yeah, change does not mean anything at the symptom level where it cannot work. So correction belongs only at the level where change is possible. And that's his mind. He has to change how he's looking at that situation to recognize that that's not true. And he had to go inward. He had to go inward to feel the safety within, to know, to disidentify from the body and the ego. And that's the change in the mind, not the behavior. And this is a matter of willingness. So he was willing to listen to me and believe me and look within to know that that's true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes
Sonia?
sense.
Yeah.
I mean, so you could say that the outcome of misthought is, or controlling the outcome of misthought is really trying to control the behavior
Yes.
of the external.
Yes.
So basically, he was giving his power away.
Yes, we try to control the environment.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes, exactly.
or we try to change the environment and go somewhere else. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And that usually entails separation, right? Because he's projecting guilt onto his brothers and sisters as to being responsible for his feeling, you know, uncomfortable and upset. And so it's all a projection of, it's all a perception of separation there. Yeah. Okay. Let's see, it's my turn. The correction of fear is your responsibility. When you ask for release from fear, you are implying that it is not. You should ask instead for help in the conditions that have brought the fear about. These conditions always entail a willingness to be separate. At that level, you can help it. You are much too tolerant of mind wandering and are passively condoning your mind's miscreations. The particular result does not matter, but the fundamental error does. The correction is always the same. Before you choose to do anything, ask me if your choice is in accord with mine. If you are sure that it is, there will be no fear. Okay. So this is giving us a lot of really good, good guidance here as far as decision making and kind of what to notice so that we can correct the, so we can release the fear, because the correction of fear is your responsibility. Okay, it's a miscreation of our mind. And for us to ask for release from fear is implying that our mind is not the one that's miscreating it, and therefore we're going to see it as out of our control, and therefore we're going to feel victims to our own fear. And so we want to ask for help instead in the conditions that have brought the fear about. And they always entail a willingness to be separate. And you can kind of see that in the example with my grandkids, because the projection of the cause of his discomfort to what they were doing, that's a willingness to be separate, because it's saying we are not one self. You are separate from me and can what's the word? Can want harm to me. You can be a threat to me because you're separate from me, and you can hurt me.
Attack.
You can attack me, and therefore you're not loving. So, and that's a projection that basically says that I'm not loving. I'm seeing it in you, but it's really what I'm afraid. It's my own fear. My own fear is that I'm not loving, and in order to not see that that's my own fear, I project it onto you as not being loving and being attacking. And so this is what we need to, you could say, take responsibility for or own, but not in a judgmental way. We just have to look at our own fear within our own self, that we've changed ourselves, that we're no longer as God created us, which is loving, which is innocent. Because the thing with guilt is that it makes us believe that we have sinned against God. And so now God is not, what's the word? God can be our enemy now. God's going to get me now because I offended God in some way. Or my parent, who plays the role of God to me in some way. Or my brother, because I have been mean to my little brother. I'm the one that attacks him and beats him up. And then, of course, I'm going to be afraid of him. So you are too tolerant of mind wandering and are passively condoning your mind's miscreations. Yeah, so if we don't question our own thinking and our own fearful thoughts, then we condone those miscreations. And the result doesn't matter but the error does. So, yeah. So we're not, in other words, we're not taking responsibility for our thinking. And we're letting our mind wander and just let it go off into fearful stuff. And so the correction is always the same. Before you choose anything, to do anything, ask me if your choice is in accord with mine. And if you're sure that it is, there will be no fear. Okay, so that means there's congruency between the what I want to do, the behavior, and the right mind. So if there's no fear. Okay, so if there's fear, then there's incongruency there. And that means that there's some ego thoughts there that are fearful. And so I have not chosen the Holy Spirit as my guide. I'm letting these fearful thoughts kind of control what I do. And some of the strongest fearful thoughts are the survival thoughts. Those are, and they're so well rehearsed that they're kind of like instincts. So we don't even, we've kind of given them autonomy. So we don't even have to decide in the moment. We just, oh, sorry, you scared me and I accidentally whacked you on the head. That's my fight instinct, come out swinging. So yeah, anyway, any questions there?
No.
Okay. Sonia?
Fear is always a sign of strain, arising whenever what you want conflicts with what you do. This situation arises in two ways. First, you can choose to do conflicting things, either simultaneously or successively. This produces conflicted behavior, which is intolerable to you because the part of the mind that wants to do something else is outraged. Second, you can behave as you think you should, but without entirely wanting to do so. This produces consistent behavior, but entails great strain. In both cases, the mind and the behavior are out of accord, resulting in a situation in which you are doing what you do not wholly want to do. This arouses a sense of coercion that usually produces rage, and projection is likely to follow. Whenever there is fear, it is because you have not made up your mind. Your mind is therefore split, and your behavior inevitably becomes erratic. Correcting at the behavior level can shift the error from the first to the second type, but will not obliterate the fear.
Mhm. Okay, so this is a really, really, really good paragraph. If you want to understand, you know, the patterns that we have in terms of behaviors that get stuck that we want to change, but we can't change. We keep going back and forth. So let me just say that the Course says that inner peace is healing. Okay, and so if there's no peace and we're in internal conflict, there's going to be fear, and that's going to result in some type of sickness. Okay, so because it's always a sign of strain, and we understand more and more now how stress, which is strain, gets so modern medicine is beginning to understand that connection between stress and sickness. Okay, and fear is always going to indicate a sign of stress or strain arising whenever what you want conflicts with what you do, because there's no internal consistency. So you could almost say that there's a dissociation there, okay, between the behavior and the doing, the body, and the what we want, the ego. And this situation can arise in two ways. So if we choose to do conflicting things, either simultaneously or successively. So in this case, the behavior would be inconsistent. It would be like, let's see, what would be an example, a good example? Well, you know, sometimes people, let's see, conflicting things. So let's see,
Or like maybe going to an event that you don't want to go to. Or no, that would be the second
that's
one.
the second one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, the second one, I can think of a lot of examples, but
Mm.
the first one, it's simultaneously or successively. So I can let's see, doing conflicting things. Okay. Oh, well, I can think of, for example, bulimia. Okay. I want to eat, so I eat. Okay. But then I don't want the food, so I throw it up. So that's conflicting, doing conflicting things, because I'm ingesting it and then I'm taking it out. Okay. And so, and you can do that, that would be successively. So, I mean, unless it just, you know, happens right away, but yeah. And so this produces conflicted behavior, which is intolerable to you because the part of the mind that wants to do something else is outraged. Okay, so that's almost like a split in the ego and the ego. You know, it's like, yeah, I want to eat it, but I don't want to eat it. But it shows up as I ingest it, I do it, I put it in my body, and then I make myself throw up to take it out of my body.
I have a question. Could that apply to relationships? Like, I hate you, but I love you. I
Yeah,
love you, but I hate you. Okay, that's what it reminded me of.
yes. So in fact, it's kind of, yeah, I think it might play out in like abusive
Yeah,
relationships.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, where I start a conflict, I start a fight, um, um, and then I make up and, you know, bring you flowers or something. And I promise I'm never going to do it again. So it's doing conflicting things, you know, successively. Yeah. Yeah. And the second one is you can behave as you think you should, but without entirely wanting to do so. So we're pretty familiar with that. I think everybody's very familiar with that. Yeah, you know, I think I should I think I should be going to church every Sunday, but I don't want to, you know, but I do it anyway because my mom wants me to. And so this produces consistent behavior, but entails great strain. So in both cases, the mind and the behavior are out of accord, resulting in situations in which you are doing what you do not wholly want to do. And so you could think of that as compromising ourselves. So we get a lot of, when I work with clients with autoimmune issues, they have a pattern of compromising themselves, you know, staying in a job that they think they should because it's going to benefit them in some way, but they hate it. So they don't, you know, they don't really want to be there, but they're there anyway. So, and so they're, you know, they're behaving consistently. They're doing everything they're supposed to at work, but only because they should. So that entails great strain. And it's also, you know, it's also a sense of not being wholly honest with ourselves. So there's also a sense of self-deception in there, or even a sense of betrayal to ourselves. And of course, all of that, this arouses a sense of coercion that usually produces rage. Well, yeah. I mean, if I do that long enough, I begin to hate myself. You know, I have a lot of rage against myself, or heck, I begin to hate my boss, you know, or whatever. So there's a lot of stuck conflict and, you know, rage in there. Because if I start feeling just coerced, like I have no choice, you know, it's almost like suppressing the autoimmune system that's just festering inside, because it feels like it's got to obey, or it has to conform, but because it doesn't have a chance of succeeding in winning the battle, you know. And that can happen when you're very young too, when you're a small child and you feel coerced a lot by your parents always telling you what to do, and you do it, but you don't really want to do it. And if you repress that, because you're not supposed to be unhappy. That's another no-no from your parents. Well, yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's stuck in there, and projection is likely to follow because I'm swallowing so much stuff that it gets really intolerable to hold all that strain, and I'm going to want to project it, get it out in some way. So whenever there's fear, it's because you have not made up your mind. Your mind is therefore split. Yes, and the Bible talks about serving two masters, and how you can't serve two masters. It's really, really, really stressful. And so the behavior inevitably becomes erratic because you're kind of torn apart. There's like two authorities, one pulling this way and one pulling that way. Yeah. But whenever there's internal conflict, there's fear. So there's fear of not doing what I should do. So there's fear of being completely honest, with what I want to do, because past experience has told me that I'm just going to get a timeout, or I'm going to get spanked, or I'm going to get rejected, or something like that's going to happen. And now I'm afraid. So, yeah. Okay. Anything more there?
I think it reemphasizes that we can change it on a behavioral level, but that doesn't actually change the fear. So we really need to address it at the level of the mind.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because it's still split. There's still no congruency there. Yeah. Okay. Sonia?
Okay. It is possible to reach a state in which you bring your mind under my guidance without conscious effort, but this implies a willingness that you have not developed as yet. The Holy Spirit cannot ask more than you are willing to do. The strength to do comes from your undivided decision. There is no strain in doing God's will as soon as you recognize that it is also your own. The lesson here is quite simple, but particularly apt to be overlooked. I will therefore repeat it, urging you to listen. Only your mind can produce fear. It does so whenever it is conflicted in what it wants, producing inevitable strain because wanting and doing are discordant. This can be corrected only by accepting a unified goal.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, one of the issues is right here with line number 4. There's no strain in doing God's will as soon as you recognize that it is also your own. And so the fear of God is the fear that God's will is not in our best interests. Okay, so we have to look at how we are judging God because if we are afraid of God's will, we tend to look at God as dualistic, the way that I grew up, I believe that God was God in the Old Testament, and the Son of God was, of the New Testament. But to me, God was a God that was not just willing to help me, but it was a God that was willing to punish me if I didn't obey, which is a fearful God. And so for me, that brought up a sense of coercion. If I think of God's will for me, I would think of, well, if God is not always loving because he wants to punish me, how can I trust that his will is going to be always in my best interest? So there's conflict. There was a lot of conflict there. Because of the image that I had of God as being dualistic. And the course, of course, is reminding us that truth, God knowledge, is not dualistic, because there's no separation in it. It's eternal and there's nothing outside of it. So there is no opposition. There's no way to really attack God, and there is no nothing that can oppose God and the love of God. And therefore, God as love is unconditional, and his will is unconditional and unconditionally loving. And God created me that way. And therefore, if I can trust that God's will is truly only loving, I'm not going to be in conflict, because I recognize that that is also my own, because that's really what I want for myself, without fear. And therefore, if I make up an image of God that is anything other than completely unconditional love, my mind is going to produce fear. And if I hold on to that, it's because I am conflicted in what I want. And what that means is that if I want the love of God, but the love of God is unconditional. So I cannot make that love be only for this group, okay, or of believers, and not for this group. And I cannot make it special just for me if I obey all of the, commandments. And so it means that if I want a God that is going to personally love me at the exclusion of other brothers and sisters, if I want to believe that my brothers and sisters deserve punishment for what they've done wrong, okay, I'm going to have to believe in a God that is dualistic, and I'm going to be in fear. And so because what I want is inequality. I want a love that is conditional. I want God to love me more than you, because I want to be good and I want to feel like I'm good and not bad, because I haven't looked at all the stuff that's inside of me that I've judged myself to be bad, and I've projected it onto you. So I see you as bad. And that's why there's fear, and that's why there's conflict in my mind, because I want to be loved, but it's a wish for specialness. It's not really the love of God that I want. And so the correction is to accept a unified goal and to say, okay, if I want the love of God, then I'm going to have to want the love of God for every other brother and sister, for every other, created, for every other creation, because it's all one creation and God created it. And why do I want to split it up into parts now? Just so that God's love can be conditional and I can be more special than you. Or I can justify attack and say, yes, you should be punished because, you didn't do what you should have done, that kind of thing. So, and that's how I justify unforgiveness. I can say, well, no, what you did crossed the line and you don't deserve to be forgiven. And that's why the Course says that it's basically it's an all or nothing kind of a deal. It's illusion, or it's knowledge and truth. And one little thought that is not in alignment with truth, and we're in illusion. Because the love of God is completely unconditional and there's no room for exclusion, because there's no separation. It's oneness. So anyway, and that's basically perfect equality. So there's a lot there to let go of, because we're very invested. If we're invested in competition, if we're invested in winning, if we're invested in let's see, in getting the highest academic degrees, or if we're invested in anything that would distinguish us and make us different from somebody else, and we identify with that, then we are choosing to perceive separation, and we're going to be in conflict. So any questions there? Okay, whenever you're ready, Teresa, it's number 7.
The first corrective step in undoing the error is to know first that the conflict is an expression of fear. To say to yourself that you must somehow have chosen not to love, or the fear could not have arisen. Then the whole process of correction becomes nothing more than a series of pragmatic steps in the larger process of accepting the atonement as the remedy. These steps may be summarized in this way. Know first that this is fear. Fear arises from lack of love. The only remedy for lack of love is perfect love. Perfect love is the atonement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so perfect love is unconditional love. And so the only remedy for lack of love is unconditional love. And that means the accepting the atonement, which says, the separation never happened. I may be perceiving you as separate from me, but that's not true. And if I have a lack of love for you, then I am forgetting who I am, because I am denying that I was created as perfect love. So it's a denial of it's a forgetting of perfect love. And that's fear. And it's a choice, when we choose unforgiveness instead of love, when we choose the grievance instead of the miracle. That's what we are believing. We're believing in separation, which is the ego. That we are a separated self and that we are no longer perfect love. Okay, anything there? Okay, number 8. I have emphasized that the miracle or the expression of atonement is always a sign of respect from the worthy to the worthy. The recognition of this worth is reestablished by the atonement. It is obvious then that when you are afraid, you have placed yourself in a position where you need atonement. You have done something loveless, having chosen without love. And this is precisely the situation for which the atonement was offered. The need for the remedy inspired its establishment. As long as you recognize only the need for the remedy, you will remain fearful. However, as soon as you accept the remedy, you have abolished the fear. This is how true healing occurs. Okay, so the miracle as an expression of the atonement is always a sign of respect from the worthy to the worthy. Okay. So the miracle, the source of miracle is love, and it's perfect love. And it is an expression of the atonement that says the separation never happened. Okay. I may be perceiving you as separate from me and believing that you can hurt me, okay, and that you have hurt me, okay, but that is not true because there's no separation. And because there's no separation, because we are one creation and God creates only perfect love, we are both equally worthy of that love. And therefore, if I am expressing anything other than love, I am forgetting my true nature, my true self as perfect love, perfectly worthy of receiving love and of giving love, because I'm not practicing it. So in practicing not love, I'm believing that I'm not worthy of it. So when we are afraid, we have placed ourselves in a position where we need atonement. So because when we are afraid, we have forgotten that the separation never happened. And I'm seeing you as separate from me and as an enemy that can hurt me. Or I see myself as evil and can hurt you. And so if when I do something loveless, then I have made a choice without love. I have taken guidance from my fearful thoughts and followed, and that resulted in that behavior that was loveless. And so, this is why the atonement was offered, because the forgetting, we needed to be reminded that there is no separation. There's no because giving is receiving. So there's no way for me to attack you without attacking myself, because we're one self. Um, okay. So when we are fearful, we need the need for the remedy inspired its establishment. Okay. We have a need to remember the truth that the separation never happened. But if we only recognize the need for it, we will stay fearful, because we have not taken it down to the behavior level and practice the forgiveness. So the practice of the forgiveness is what brings the behavior in alignment with the recognition that, yes, I need the remedy. But recognizing that I need the remedy and I don't want to be fearful is not going to get rid of the fear. I have to practice, I have to be willing to practice the forgiveness. And I practice the forgiveness because I recognize that there is no separation. So it's my thinking that's the cause of my fear, and not you with your, you know. And so this is how true healing occurs, because it brings the mind back to true perception, where we remember that what we are is perfect love, and therefore we have perfect safety, and we don't need to be afraid. Okay, let's see. I think it's your turn, Sonia.
Everyone experiences fear, yet it would take very little right thinking to realize why fear occurs. Few appreciate the real power of the mind, and no one remains fully aware of it all the time. However, if you hope to spare yourself from fear, there are some things you must realize and realize fully. The mind is very powerful and never loses its creative force. It never sleeps. Every instant it is creating. It is hard to recognize that thought and belief combine into a power surge that can literally move mountains. It appears at first glance that to believe such power about yourself is arrogant, but that is not the real reason you do not believe it. You prefer to believe that your thoughts cannot exert real influence because you are actually afraid of them. This may allay awareness of the guilt, but at the cost of perceiving the mind as impotent. If you believe that what you think is ineffectual, you may cease to be afraid of it, but you are hardly likely to respect it. There are no idle thoughts. All thinking produces form at some level.
Mhm. Okay, anything with that, Sonia? Anything that comes up?
I think let's see, is it it's it's line 8. It is hard to recognize that thought and belief combine into a power surge that can literally move mountains.
Mhm.
I don't know, that stood out for me, the thought and belief combine, because it's so easy to just say, oh no, I don't have any power over, my thoughts can't do anything, or my beliefs, but it's not taking that responsibility that's kind of costly. I think, at least
Mhm,
for me. Yeah.
mhm,
So
mhm. Yeah, and part of it is that we feel guilty, for miscreating things,
mhm,
and we don't, and we're used to trying to project the guilt rather than recognize, oh man, I'm guilty of having chosen the thought system of fear and not of love, because I don't want to look at my unloving thing of what I do that's not loving.
mhm,
So, but if we don't look at it, we can't take responsibility for the power that we have misused, and therefore we don't correct it and we keep misusing it. So yeah, everyone experiences fear. And let's see, it would take very little right thinking to realize why fear occurs. Um, okay, so when we're in our right mind, we would understand that fear occurs because we are believing in separation. Okay, and the power of that belief, quote unquote, makes it so in our mind. And from there, then there's conflict. Okay, because now I am identifying with being a body, and bodies can attack, and have a private mind that, let's see, that has a will of its own, and I can't control that. So I've just I have just um, descended the ladder into darkness and fear. Um, and so we do have to recognize the power of our mind to make up our experiences, and to project what we want to see. So if we hope to spare ourselves from fear, there's a few things we need to realize fully. So one, the mind is very powerful, never loses its creative force, never sleeps. So even even in dreaming, where the mind is acting out its own ideas, and so if we don't recognize that we do need to take vigilance over our thinking, that we do need to be responsible for releasing fearful thoughts and recognizing when we're afraid that we have chosen the wrong teacher, and that we have done something unloving that we need to that needs correction, that needs forgiveness. um, then that pattern, that situation just keeps repeating. So let's see. So it appears at first that to believe such power about yourself is arrogant, but that's not the real reason you do not believe it. You prefer to believe that your thoughts cannot exert real influence because you're actually afraid of them. So what often happens is that as we begin to realize how powerful our thoughts are, then we begin to get in touch with the guilt, because the mind then says, okay, well then your thinking mind is guilty of all the bad things that happen. Okay, and so we go into blame, and so that's why we get afraid of them. because we've just judged them. And so we're saying, we're realizing they're powerful, but at the same time, we're saying, yes, and those thoughts produce real effects that are bad. Okay, without understanding that the ego thought system is a system of fear that is not real. So we've made fear real to ourselves by being afraid of our own thoughts. And so we're going to be afraid of the effects, and then we're going to blame ourselves for producing things we don't want, you know, like sickness or whatever. So then we say, okay, well, yeah, I don't want to go there. So let me just perceive the mind as impotent, powerless, and I'll just project all causality onto the body and make the body the guilty one. So I don't have to be afraid of the power of my own thinking. And so if you believe that what you think is ineffectual, you may cease to be afraid of it, but you're hardly likely to respect it. So then we're just going to think, well, then, you know, if the body and everything is causal, then my mind is basically worthless. What's the point of it? It's powerless. It's not going to help me solve any, you know, if I've made everything separate from me and physical, causal, I might as well not even have a mind. So I might as well just be mindless. But there are no idle thoughts. So all thinking produces form at some level. Yeah. And you know, if we go into fear, that we're going to be afraid of healing. Because it's going to be really hard to, let's see. We're gonna have a really hard time working with our own thoughts and our own minds and releasing the fear. Because we're just not going to want to go there. So, yeah, we've made fear so real that we're afraid of it now. And so there's two layers of fear there now that have to be released. The fear of fear. And it's just the fear that it's a block to the awareness of love's presence, because we have to go to that power to recognize that that power is only loving. And release the fear of God. Which is tied to that, because that's our true, you know, our identity is as a creation of God, is that we are part of God. So we're actually afraid of ourselves as perfect love, because we've made of ourselves, we've miscreated what we are. We've misperceived what God is. We've misperceived what our brothers are. We've misperceived everything. And we're wrong about everything. And that's really hard to swallow. So we just got to chip at it a little bit at a time. And that's fine. Okay, so any questions there before we stop?
Seems like a lot of responsibility.
A lot
There are
of,
no idle thoughts. all thinking produces form at some level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the whole shebang, right? um, but the thing about the responsibility is that there's no what's the word? There's no degree of difficulty in miracles.
Right.
Yeah. So even if it is a lot of responsibility to the miracle, the word a lot is meaningless. Yeah, because so that perception of a lot is an evaluation.
Mhm.
Yes. And it's an evaluation of what we perceive to be true, but it's not true. So because none of it is true, it's really easy. Yeah, and the part of the mind, the Holy Spirit is the one that recognizes illusion for illusion. It doesn't confuse reality with illusion. That's the ego thought system of fear. So, yeah. So it could happen just like that. Yeah. Because it's all the same, right? It's all the same to the Holy Spirit. It's all the same. It's just one problem. It's the problem of separation. And it never happened.
Mhm.
Yeah. I was telling Sonia, it's one last thing that was kind of interesting. What never happened, okay, and never happened. So once we put the what in front of never happened, it seems to be a thing. And therefore it seems to have some sense of existence. Okay. But it never happened. So no, it has no existence. It's just the way, the little tricks that our mind, comes up with to keep us confused. Yeah. Okay, so that concludes this section, and that's fear and conflict. Let's see. And so, yes, and so the release of fear is healing. So that's what we are, that's the purpose here. The purpose is for the healing of our mind. And so we want to be able to abolish fear. And to accept the remedy is to accept the atonement, which is the answer to the problem of the belief in separation. But we have to practice the forgiveness, because that's how we choose, that's how we remember that we are perfect love. Okay, so thank you. And next time we'll do cause and effect, chapter 2, section 7.